someone won a Grammy after 31 nominations. I said, yes, which one is it that you need replaced? And she said, what do you mean, which one? And also the day before I had accepted with my sister his Lifetime Achievement Award. I always kind of write or co-write lyrics along with melody. Hi, I'm Anoushka Shankar and you're watching Bollywood Hungama.
It's a privilege to have Anoushka Shankar with us. Her latest album, Love Letters, is just out. We'll talk about that and a lot more. Pleasure having you with us on Bollywood Hungama.
Thank you.
Tell us something about Love Letters, because I believe it is from a very personal space for you.
I mean, music, I guess, is always from a personal space, but Love Letters in particular is something where I tried to allow that original emotion that started the songs to stay there till the end and not get disguised by too much instrumentation or too many things, to allow the songs to still be quite raw and intimate.
Right.
So it's a collection of songs that does feel very, very intimate. I wanted to feel like people were, if they're listening to it, that they feel like they're in the same room with me and I'm just playing in my living room. You know, that kind of a feeling.
Right. You've collaborated with a lot of artists, including Shilpa Rao, as I was just talking about. Tell us something about the collaborations part, please.
I was very drawn to female collaborators in particular on this project. It felt like the kind of music we were making was quite feminine in nature, and so there's a host of incredible women from around the world, including Shilpa Rao singing on one song, Ayana Witter-Johnson, who's an amazing cellist from England, Ibei, the French-Cuban duo who sing amazingly, Olive Lenz, who is my principal collaborator, a German-Turkish singer based in London, and across the board, just a lot of amazing women kind of on the technical side as well, and yeah, I was really happy to get to work with all these people.
You've written the lyrics as well?
Yeah, I always kind of write or co-write lyrics along with melody, and in this situation as well, I wrote a lot of original poetry that then got moved into song form, or I co-wrote with people, so yeah. From
what I understand, the songs also talk about heartbreak and as I said in the beginning, maybe something that is quite personal, because you've also worked on albums where you've talked about social issues like migration and other stuff. But this is more a journey of sorts for you in the last 2 years, maybe.
You're right. I mean, I think I've written, for example, on an album called Traces of You a few years ago, that my father happened to pass away while I was making that album, so a lot of the songs ended up influenced by that. But then after that I moved into a good few years of writing a lot more influenced by kind of humanitarian issues and social issues. So my album Land of Gold was very much about the refugee crisis and about those kind of situations. And then from there, with Love Letters, it's kind of moved into a more personal space. I went through a breakup, and that obviously influenced my songwriting, like it does for any artist. So it's just, I guess, an ongoing process. I write from emotion, but whether that emotion is coming from a personal experience or a reaction to an external experience, it's still coming from whatever provokes a strong emotion in me. So breakups obviously will be one of those things.
You've been nominated for Grammys 6 times around. What will it take for you to
I don't know. I mean, it feels like I think the record is like 31. Someone won a Grammy after 31 nominations. So it can go and go and go, or you could never win. That's a possibility too. So who knows?
Your dad apparently has won, I think, three of them?
Five. Plus a lifetime Grammy.
Plus a lifetime. And the year that he won, I think 2 Grammys, apparently he thought that he has only won 1 Grammy that year.
Not exactly. I mean, basically the story is that a long time ago we all knew that he was, the first Indian to win a Grammy, so everyone knew he had won a Grammy, and he lost a Grammy. And so my mum called the Grammy Foundation to see about getting a Grammy made again so that we could have one, Right. And they called her back and said, yes, which one is it that you need replaced? And she said, what do you mean, which one? So he's that kind of person always, that like he didn't even know that he had 2 Grammys back in the day, so he was kind of amazing that way. But eventually he had 5 plus a Lifetime Achievement Grammy, when he's the only Indian to have that.
Right. And you went to collect the Lifetime Achievement.
That was a weird year, because that year he and I were nominated against each other in the World Music category. So I was nominated for Traveller, which was my flamenco Indian music album, and he was nominated for the Living Room Sessions Volume 1, and we got the news, and it was kind of really funny and amazing. But then he passed away, and then after that we found out he was getting the Lifetime Achievement Grammy. So we were all in LA together, my mom and I and my sister, and it was really weird, because like it was quite emotional to kind of be sitting there not knowing who was going to win, and then like they said my name, and then they said some other names, they said my dad's name, and then he won. So I went up to receive his award, and also the day before I had accepted with my sister his Lifetime Achievement Award. So very special experiences.
Right. Okay, and when you just received the Lifetime Achievement Award along with Nora. You made, I think, a wonderful speech.
Thanks.
About the experience of him being what he is. And I believe he's completing 100 years on 7th April.
It would have been his 100th birthday on the 7th of April. Yeah.
So I believe you guys are planning something special.
We are doing a series of concerts around the world. So we will be doing one concert on his birthday in London, which will involve many special guests, including many of his senior disciples from here. My sister, Nitin Sawhney, just amazing artists taking part. But then we're also going and doing similar concerts in North America, in other countries in Europe. And of course, ultimately, we will be coming to India. So at the end of the year, we'll be doing a series of celebratory concerts around major cities in India.
So 100 years, it must have been quite a journey. And I was watching one of the interviews with Simi Grewal, and he was an extremely, I think, a playful guy. Like he used to really have a great time. His eyes were twinkling all the time.
Yeah, they did right till the end.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So how was it having him around?
I mean, he was my dad. I mean, I think but that is an interesting point. Like, he was really known for his kind of humor. It was a very childlike humor, a very innocent humor, very mischievous. And I think, like, a lot of the times I find that, you know, some of the kind of really greatest people that we think of as these sort of larger-than-life legends, often they're the same people who still kind of maintain that real curiosity about life, about other people, about other things. They're not just these kind of great masters, you know, they're also just these beautiful, fun, childlike people. And he was very much like that.
As an artist, what sort of influence has he had on you?
Have I had?
Has he had on you, yeah?
Well, he was my father and he was my guru. So I think, you know, he was my main primary influence as a musician right from the beginning, from when I began. So you know, throughout my whole career, I would say everything I've done in my music, even the music that's very far from the classical music I learned from him, that's still in my root. That's still what I learned first. So it's in me, you know, so it's in everything I do.
You also mentioned that at the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award ceremony was that your mom had a huge role to play in him touching 91. That was the age that he was alive for, and just him being healthy and happy. Tell us something about the relationship that both of them shared.
Well, they were together, I think, nearly 30 years by the end, and you know, they were an incredibly inspirational couple, you know, and so to grow up around that was a really beautiful model of how relationships can be. But she also, you know, she was like his partner, but she was also his kind of business partner. She was someone who was a creative partner. She also was his carer, you know. So as the years went on and as he got older as well, like, she became more and more instrumental in the fact that he was even still touring right till the end. You know, that wouldn't have been happening without her, no question.
She also mentioned in that Simi Grewal interview that if there's heaven, the concept of heaven or hell, just seeing you perform is something like an idea of heaven.
That's sweet. I don't remember her saying that. Yeah. That's very sweet.
What sort of influence has she had on you as a performer?
You know, actually, more than you would think. I mean, she was my mom. She is my mom. She was actually my first musical teacher, even before my dad. She was the one teaching me simple sargam every morning before I went to school. But she also was more of the person kind of helping to shape my career when I was younger. And then obviously as I grew up, I started doing more of that myself and with people I work with. But she was really there from the beginning. And I think she really helped me kind of have a sense of integrity and strength about what I do, because as a person she has that kind of really strong integrity. That's something that people really recognize in her about who she is. She's very individualistic, you know, she really knows who she is, and I think that was a really good model for me in my career, but also as a person.
When it comes to love letters, for example, I've been listening to it since morning. It's a trip of its own, and I personally feel that in classical music, the sort of maybe charm it has, maybe depth you can call it, or maybe like a unique vibe that it has is something. It's something totally different from maybe anything else in the world. Maybe this album, for example, there's a lot of spirituality into it. There's a world of its own, and then you have the lyrics as well. Do you feel that in classical music and the fact that you can collaborate with Western sensibilities as well, it's one of the most unique experiments that has happened in music, maybe in the last 50 years or whatever?
I mean, that's a slightly unanswerable question, because I think Indian classical music, yes, is one of the most unique forms of music in the world, and it's one of the forms of music that really prioritizes that spiritual quality at the heart of it. So it does really have the possibility of really impacting people on quite a deep level. You know, Love Letters, which you're talking about, for example, is not classical. You know, there's nothing about Love Letters that is a classical album. It's a collection of songs with lyrics in English. But I think because I happen to play the sitar, what becomes very unusual is to hear this music that's kind of difficult to identify, which I find really interesting. I like music that you can't pin down in that way. But it has the sitar, which is such an evocative sound, and it's so associated with that kind of spirituality and depth that sometimes it can kind of lend that to other forms of music as well when you have it in there. So it's sort of, for me, it exists in a slightly undefinable space. I wouldn't call Love Letters classical by any stretch of...
Fusion.
Well, I wouldn't call it that either because I can't stand that word. Like most musicians, I know, we can't stand that word. Because it doesn't mean anything. I mean, I think, like I come to India and I do press, but if I go abroad and I do press, fusion means something completely different, you know? Fusion, when you say fusion, it just means a mix of two things. That's all it means. So what is that then? If you call something fusion music, it basically means anything and everything. You know? That's it. That's all it means. So it's a kind of pointless term, really.
But don't you feel that, like say, what your father did with, say, George Harrison, for example?
He taught George Harrison, so he was his disciple.
And the way George Harrison, I think, utilized in a way sitar in his music as well, which I feel that maybe gave it a whole new personality, a whole new definition. So maybe from that context, maybe.
Well, I think that, you know, the sitar, again, is so kind of emblematic of Indian classical music. But then, of course, from what Uncle George did and other people from the 60s onwards, it started to be kind of associated with that kind of psychedelic sound. Or in the 70s, that kind of prog rock sound. You know, my cousin Anoushka Shankar was really influential with that as well. And then now what I'm kind of doing as well is sort of like outside, it's not anything to do with that sound, but neither is it classical. It's sort of like various crossovers, for example, with flamenco or with electronica or with pop or whatever. Like it's interesting to me that the instrument can be so iconic, but also it can exist in other ways. It can also grow outside of that. So yeah, I do find it interesting.
In terms of Indian classical music, what sort of experiments do you like to do with the Indian classical music in terms of the ragas? Do you like to just create something of your own? I
wouldn't be so presumptuous as to just say, oh, I like to be experimental with Indian classical music. Indian classical music is a very deep and intense form of music that takes a huge amount of study and work to be able to play with any amount of adequacy. So the other thing to remember as well is that our Indian classical music is very unique in that it's also an improvised form of music. Exactly. So when we think about classical music, there's a kind of feeling that it's something old, you know. But unlike Western classical music, where people are playing things on a page that were written 400 years ago or 300 years ago, people in Indian classical music are being experimental because it's in the moment, you know. People are improvising upon maybe ragas or themes that have been around for centuries. But that is experimental. You know, the very act of sitting and making music in the moment with another musician on stage is experimenting. Right. So I think our music is very rich and experimental just in and of itself.
As say Western classical music is primarily, you know, coming together of a lot of instruments, and they're just working towards one common maybe symphony or like a melody. But the beauty of in classical music in many cases is the way, say for example, sitar and tabla, when they're coming together, in a way they're just trying to outdo each other, and in a way they're just trying to add value to each other as well, which can be beautiful as well. What are your views on this entire, in a way, combative instinct that we have, maybe say between?
It's a good question, and it's interesting. I don't think historically it should be combative. Right. It's meant to be complementary. Right. You know, it's meant to be a journey that two people are creating together and to enhance each other, to grow a story together, to reach some kind of a union that, like, you take the listeners on that journey. And in moments, I think it can be really interesting and exciting to see that become a little bit playful and competitive and to feel that energy between two people. But I also do think there's a bit of a trend in classical music for it to get a little bit too much down that road. I think, like, it can get a little bit overly acrobatic and sort of about outdoing each other in a way that I sometimes kind of feel like I lose the experience of sitting and watching and listening to beautiful music if it's just about two soloists trying to show off the whole time. You know, it should be ideally some kind of an ego-free process as well, that you're there to help each other and create something beautiful. When you see that to me is very beautiful.
You also experimented with acting.
A long time ago.
Yeah, but can we see that happening?
You know, I would never say never because, for example, I used to say I would never sing, but on Love Letters I sang on one song called Lovable. I'm singing along with some other people. So that shows me that, like, even the things you think you'll never do, maybe one day you'll do it. So at the moment, it's not on my radar. I have no plans to act again, and no one's asked in a while. So I don't imagine doing it, but I would never say never. I guess if the right thing at the right time happened, maybe.
You also lent your support to various causes, either through your music and even otherwise. You've also been instrumental in supporting the cause of Nirbhaya when it happened a few years ago, and as I was talking about the refugee crisis as well. How important is the urge in you to just support the social causes?
It's important. I do believe we all have the ability to make a difference, and I do believe that using our voices when we feel something strongly is important, but I very much believe that's something that each individual has to find their own balance and find their own way of doing that for themselves. So I would never kind of point at other people and say you should use your art or you should do your, you know, I think how we all choose to be active citizens wherever we are is down to our own choice.
Any cause in recent times that has taken your attention and you'd like to contribute?
I mean, I think like we talked about Land of Gold, like at that point I kind of felt like my whole work was very much focused on outward issues, and then with Love Letters I think having these really big personal experiences happen, I feel like as an artist I've moved inwards a little bit more at the moment, and right now I'm in a place where I'm feeling a little bit more personal, and like that's where everything's coming from, but I'm sure it'll grow out from there again. The
Hindi film industry, maybe Bollywood, is that something that you find exciting?
Musically?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things happening that are interesting, and I think like especially now the kind of sound has really changed. There's a lot of new influences coming in. There's kind of new kind of soundtracks being made now that feel really interesting. I would be very open to doing that. Yeah, right. And I think scoring is something that I feel more and more interested in as the years go by as well.
Because Pandit Hari Prasad Chaurasia and Shiv Kumar Sharma ji, they've been part of several movies, like especially for Yash Chopra ji as Shiv Hari.
You mean as classical musicians?
Yes.
Well, first of all, I don't primarily see myself as a classical musician. I mean, the bulk of what I do is quite outside of that, so I don't know if that's the right comparison. But my father as well, of course, has given some of the most iconic, soundtracks over the 20th century. So yeah, I think as solo artists, if that's what you mean, musicians who have primarily outside of film musical careers, I think it's very interesting watching them come and do soundtracks. You know, whether in India or in the West. You know, even someone like Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails started doing soundtracks, and it was incredible because it was this whole new sound that came, you know, so I do think that's lovely.
So anything in the recent time that has attracted you in the Hindi film industry, any soundtrack, any songs, any music directors?
I wouldn't single anything out in particular, but I just think like obviously we've had a particular sound for quite a while, which is very beautiful, but also I feel like these elements of hip hop, elements of electronica, like all of this coming in has really helped to kind of change what the standard sound is, and I find that very interesting.
In the world music right now, who are the artists that fascinate you?
I'm listening still to a lot of Niels Fram, who's a kind of neoclassical pianist, composer. Agnes Obel, similar genre. Listening to a lot of female singer-songwriters. Yeah, a lot of piano at the moment, actually. Yurt Beving is another favorite. Just stuff that's quite relaxing at the moment, really.
Anoushka, wonderful talking to you, and all the best wishes for Love Letters, and I hope that the concert tour that you're planning for Mr. Ravi Shankar, I think just goes on to become a huge success. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
That's all we have from Bollywood Hungama. Keep on watching.
Hi, I'm Anoushka Shankar and you're watching Bollywood Hungama.